Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first Take Action Tuesday. My name is Caitlin, and joining me is Lauren. We're both youth facilitators with the Invasive Species Council of BC. You'll also see Brittany down there. Her camera's not on, but oh, there she is. Hi, Brittany. She's helping us with the technical side of things, so thank you so much, Brittany, for helping us out with this. So today we are broadcasting live from our backyards to celebrate the first week of Invasive Species Action Month, and Torrin and I are really excited to share with you some simple tips on how you can ensure that your garden is Plantwise. So Torrin, I'd love to hear all about your backyard.
Yes, Caitlin, absolutely. So I recently, as you know, I recently moved back in with my mom to Maple Ridge, and it was quite an adventure coming into the backyard after a while, because my mom and I had always managed it before I moved away and I came back, and she's been doing a great job, but there's been some new invasive species that I've recently found out were invasive through all my work with the Invasive Species Council. So there's two that I wanted to highlight. I don't know if you have these in Kamloops, Caitlin, but there's two that I'm trying to deal with right now. One of which is periwinkle, common periwinkle, very pretty plant. And one new one that I found is English ivy. So the periwinkle was actually planted in the garden when we moved in, and it isn't really taking over like a lot of invasive species do, but that's only because my mom has done a really great job actually managing the plant, preventing it from spreading. And the reason is that it does have nice purple flowers, and it's just been an adventure trying to learning all about what could happen and preventing that. Now, the other plant that I wanted to just touch on, English ivy, is actually coming from the neighbor's house. So I'm gonna probably go knock on the door a little later and let her know what's happening and give her some info. But we have noticed that it is a pain to deal with. I'm sure you've seen or I'm sure you've dealt with ivy before, but it is it's quite voracious. You even leave a little bit, like a little tiny fragment of it, and it will just keep growing. It'll keep growing and growing and growing. But we've decided that using the Plantwise, some Plantwise material, we're going to actually pick some awesome native species to replace these two plants. And the natives that we wanted to pick were bunchberry, because it's a nice ground cover, and we're going to hopefully use that to replace, oh, hello, bee. We're hopefully going to use that to replace the periwinkle in the back. And speaking of bee, it has really nice white flowers for pollinators, and it creates a nice ground cover, so it prevents any other unwanted plants from coming in. And the other one that we wanted to use is salal. So salal is this really nice, another ground cover, but it's actually an evergreen plant, so these leaves will stay throughout the year. And my mom especially loves that because she loves her garden being green all year round. There's nothing nicer than still seeing green there. But the one thing that was super cool about the Plantwise book that helped us pick these plants out was this little description and that called plant hardiness zones. So all across BC and all across Canada, there is this tool that you can use that allows for plant hardiness zones, and all that really means is it shows where a plant can grow. Thank you, Caitlin. Yes. So in the Grow Me Instead book. Awesome. Yeah. So plant hardiness zones show you where plants grow well and where plants don't grow well, depending on moisture, depending on sunlight, exposure, all this stuff. It's a super helpful tool to decide which plants you actually want to grow. But enough of me talking about my backyard, Caitlin. What's going on? What's going on in your backyard?
Yeah, so in my backyard, I don't have a large yard, but it's big enough to definitely be out and gardening. And right now with, we all kind of have to stay home and stay in our communities, I've really been enjoying being in my backyard and thinking about new garden beds I want to put in, and just taking out plants that aren't really beneficial to pollinators and other wildlife and adding in more native species that are beneficial. So I love how you and your mom are going out and planting native species in your backyard that are amazing for pollinators and other wildlife species. I've been in my house now for 4 years. So when I moved in, I was lucky that I didn't have any invasive plants on site, but I still keep an eye out for them, which is always needed, even if you've been in your house for a long time and maybe you have checked over your yard and there aren't any invasives on site. Seeds can, of course, be carried by the wind is one way. So unfortunately, in my yard, in the past couple of years, we've had Siberian elm come in, which is an invasive tree species that grows crazy fast. So for example, we had like a little seedling pop up, and within a year it had grown 6 feet, which is insane how fast it's growing. So we just have to keep on it and just keep pulling out any new seedlings that come up. Our neighbors have Siberian elm in their yards. The one neighbor on the weekend just cleared all of it out, so I was super happy about that. But because it is in the area, it's just constant monitoring for it to pop up in our grass coming through our fence, in our garden beds, and just to watch for it. I'm in Kamloops, so a common invasive plant that some people may put in their gardens would be blueweed. That's a nasty one that you don't want. So a native alternative to blueweed is a large-leafed lupin, which I actually have that in my backyard garden bed, and it's beautiful when it flowers in June. Kamloops, if you get up into the backcountry, is known for its beautiful lupins. There's fields full of them, and they're a beautiful native plant species that's very beneficial to wildlife. Another one I want to mention that's kind of new to Kamloops is Himalayan Blackberry, which, Torrin, I'm sure you're very familiar with it being from
yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so being a youth facilitator, I was out with my volunteers last fall, and we actually found Himalayan Blackberry in one of the local parks. So we went out and pulled it. So now I'm trying to get the word out about it in Kamloops. So it is invasive. It spreads very fast. It ruins an ecosystem by outcompeting native plant species. It can cause erosion. So if you're wanting something like blackberry, but you're wanting to thankfully plant a native species, Nootka rose is great. Also Thimble Berries, which in the hot, dry area of Kamloops is really hard to grow, but once you get out by Chase, where it's moister, I love finding Thimble Berries. They're very, very tasty. Or more of like an ornamental, you can plant red raspberry too in your backyard. So really what it boils down to is just because we have all this time right now is go out into your backyard and see what's growing. I use apps on my phone to identify plants. I use the Grow Me Instead booklet. I also use the BC Invasives website, which is bcinvasives.ca. There's lots of great information there. And if you do find an invasive, we also have tips to remove them, but make sure you plant. So there's lots of different native species that we can pick. Ones that I mentioned, also Torrin, you mentioned some great alternatives that will create healthy habitats for all of us. And yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm happy to be outside and gardening and identifying plants. So
Yeah,
I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, no, it's been it was one thing knowing and I've kind of had the knowledge of invasive species for a while, but it was a whole other step now that like you said, we're in our houses, and for the few of us who are fortunate enough to actually have a backyard, now that I have that time and actually looking into what like good alternatives are and how they actually are more beneficial to the wildlife in your garden and the wildlife as a whole. And I just want to go back to what you said. I think thimbleberry is like one of the most underrated berries. I always say like, yeah, I love thimbleberries, and they're like, you eat thimbleberries? I'm like, well, yeah. What do you mean? Thimbleberries are like my favorite berry. But we'd really love to we would love to see after this, if you guys learned anything from this, if you're more likely to go out now in your garden and use the tools that Caitlin mentioned, Report Invasives app, tons of stuff. There's tons of materials online, and just post something to your social media. My favorite thing to do is use Instagram stories. And I all the places that I love to, all the social medias that I love to follow, I'll at them if it's something related. So if you guys go into your backyard and you see an invasive species that you've identified recently, we'd love to hear from you on your social media, just at ISCBC. That would be great to see. And if you're interested in learning more about the Grow Me Instead options we talked about any nurseries that are Grow Me Instead ambassadors around you, or even just taking the Plantwise pledge, we're going to put all those links into the comment section. But other than that, I feel like we're in a good spot, Caitlin, you and I, being able to come out into the garden and do some awesome stuff down here. Well, thanks for joining, everyone. Tune in next week for our next Take Action Tuesday.
Thanks for watching. We challenge you to the What's in My Backyard photo challenge. Simply take photos of invasive species that you found in your backyard, around your neighborhood, and your favorite walking trails with the hashtag BC Contest on all social medias, or post them to our website, bcinvasivesmonth.com. And you could have the chance of winning a $350 gift card to MEC. Good luck!